Hi everyone, I'm Daphney and I own a company called Fern Connections. I want to talk today about boundaries, like setting really good boundaries and having good effective communication, right? And I'm not talking about in a romantic way. I want to talk about when you're working with or you're spending a lot of time with your friends and family, right? And you just need to be able to set good boundaries. And let me tell y'all, because I work with my daughter all the time, right? We work sometimes like 6, maybe 7 days a week, and we work really long hours together, right? So we had to establish some really good boundaries so that way we can pull apart like work versus like personal family time, right? And family conversations and just hanging out together, honey. And so, to me, it's really important, especially if you work together, if you spend a lot of time with one of your siblings or your parents or your spouse or your significant other, whoever that is, right? You want to make sure that you have boundaries, because you need to have time where if you work together like we do, that you're not just talking about work all the time. And then, you can have like a lunch break or a break and you don't even talk about work, right? And, because when you're really close to someone and you work with them, in my case, right, it's very easy to kind of pick up and start talking about like work stuff, no matter what you're doing. And so we had to establish like, okay, between this time and this time is work, right? And if we're not working, we're not talking about it, right? So that to me is really important. And a lot of times people don't know how to do that, because sometimes when I know, like for me, things pop up in my head and I start thinking about, okay, I need to do this, I need to do this, I have this idea, and I have to catch myself and say, girl, we're not working right now. You can write this down, you can put it in your notes on your phone, whatever you want to do, so that you can remember to come back to it. But what you're not going to do is interrupt our family time, our quality time, when we're not working. And so I literally have to like catch myself, but I've also like trained myself to say, okay, don't just start talking about work just because you're together, right? And a lot of times it's really, really hard, for people to pull that apart, especially when you're in business together or you spend a lot of time together. It's like you really want to be able to, establish boundaries, time boundaries, right? Maybe you do some time blocking and say between 8 and 5 or 9 to 5, whatever that is, we're only going to talk about work. Or if we're on the weekend and we're working together, then we can talk about work. But if we're not, working together on the weekend and we're just at the movies, honey, we're not going to talk about work. We're going to table that stuff, come back to it a little bit later. Like I said, write it down somewhere, put it in your notes in your phone like I like to do, and then come back to it on Monday or whatever that day is, right? Because that way you can have like quality time with the person and the people that you care about without work, always being, top of mind and top of conversation. Because who wants to talk about work all the time? I know I don't, right? So one of the things that, we had to do early on is to be able to establish good boundaries. And one of those boundaries really is about the time, like the time of day, like from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, depending on the day, we're going to talk about work, right? But after 6 o'clock, honey, we're not talking about work, because I don't want to talk about it anyway, right? I don't even want to think about it unless I have to. But the other thing too is, say for instance, if you're on a lunch break or if you're taking a break, I always like to be, considerate and respectful and say, okay, are you on a break? Because if you're on a break, I don't want to talk about work, right? Because like I said, we spend a lot of time together. We're in the same office together. And so a lot of times we are together. And so it's easy to just pick up and start talking about things. But, I know for me personally that especially if it's your spouse or your significant other, right? It can cause a lot of wear and tear on a relationship, because of the fact that you don't know when to shut it off. But you need to be able to shut it off, because you need to be able to have quality time with the people that you love without talking about your business, without talking about your work. And sometimes that's hard. But I'm just going to say that, one of the things that I find that's really important is that you have effective communication. You be able to talk about this. Say, if you have a problem with, one person not knowing when to shut it down or shut it off, right? Just talk to them about it and say, let's come up with a way for us both to be able to work together, in a peaceful way, in a productive way, without having to worry about, every time I turn around, we're talking about this. We're talking about work. We're talking about something related to work. We're talking about the people we work with. And I don't want to do that, right? So to me, effective communication is really, really important when you're trying to set boundaries. You need to be honest with people. You need to be open with people. You need to tell them the truth. Like, this is bothering me. I think, every time we go, I try to take a lunch break, you talking about this and you talking about that. And I don't want to talk about that when I'm on lunch break. So to me, start with, effective communication so that you can talk about how do you set boundaries that work for, all of you, the both of you, whatever that looks like, right? So that way, you can have like those times, because I'm going to tell you, I cherish the times that we can just be mom and daughter and just laugh and be goofy and have a good time together and not have to worry about work. We're serious about our work. Y'all know we are serious about our business, honey. We're standing on it. But at the same time, when it's time to shut it off, we have to shut it off, because at the end of the day, y'all know I'm a mama bear. At the end of the day, I am someone's mom. I'm someone's partner. I'm someone's, gammy. If y'all didn't know, I am a gammy. So anyway, so having said that, I need to have my own personal life, like everybody else needs to have their own personal life. And I need to be able to, know when to turn it off so that I can spend quality time with my family, spend quality time with my friends, right? And not talk about work. And it's unfortunate for me a little bit, and I'll tell y'all, is because every time someone finds out what I do, they just want to talk about it. Even if I don't want to talk about it, they want to talk about it. So I have to have really good boundaries no matter what, with friends, family, just associates, people that I meet. So I can say, I'm not working right now, but maybe we can talk about this next week, right? Colleagues, I try not to work on this day, so let's just talk about it, next week. I'll get back to you on Monday, whatever that is, right? But let me just say, setting really good boundaries, especially when you are really close to, family and friends, or you're working with someone that you love and you want to keep it that way, honey, then you got to set good boundaries. You got to really sit down, talk about it, make sure you're on the same page, right? Because I know it, for couples, it has to be hard sometimes, because you're running your house, you're running your business, you maybe have kids, and so you're trying to juggle all these things, but you also need to make sure that you take care of your personal relationships as well. So it doesn't matter if it's your parent or your sibling or your significant other, you want to make sure that you can take care of the personal relationships as well as your business, that you need to be able to continue in your personal relationships.